Hi, welcome everybody, and let's have a very big welcome for Jane Hardwicke Collings, who is joining us from Australia, where she's from and where she lives. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Taki'h. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real honor to be part of this wonderful project that you're offering the world.
Yeah, and when I heard about you, I was like, okay, this is a person that we need to speak to and we need to feature because wisdom keepers of our sacred blood, you basically kind of like you're that poster child of that. um, really. I know you've written many books and you have some things coming out, and I know this is what you've dedicated decades to working with. I know you've worked with mothers and daughters also, which is such a thing, what we pass on and how we pass it on. And also that you have the background of working with different spiritual communities and shamanic paths and the wisdom that comes through them. And so it's, the cross between the more traditional ways and the more, not alternative, but the expanded ways that we can look at menstrual blood and the sacredness and the potency of menstrual blood. You kind of cover the whole range. So this is extremely exciting for me and for everybody else watching, I'm sure. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you started or how your path has evolved around this theme of our sacred blood, because basically what we want to do with this particular aspect of the Sacred Blood Project is to document and to record, to have in archive all as many as possible of the treasures and the pearls and the wisdoms that can come from those like you have journeyed so vastly and so far. So please.
No, it would be my absolute pleasure and actually my responsibility to share everything that I know. And whenever I'm doing any teaching around this kind of stuff, what I always say is once you are privy to this information, it is your responsibility to share it. So
Okay, attention everybody.
Share it, yeah. So you're hearing it from me, a 62-year-old grandma, postmenopausal woman, a former midwife. I was a home birth midwife for 30 years, and I was I am still a workshop facilitator, and I founded and run the School of Shamanic Womancraft, which is a modern day women's mysteries school, international. I go around the world teaching with that and train teachers. And so one way to describe my role is a modern day women's mysteries teacher. And so how I, my connection and journey with sacred blood, basically I started my journey with sacred blood as a midwife. So I already had a complete reverence for woman, for the miracle of our bodies, the sacred dimensions of birth, the shamanic dimensions of birth. Like, there's a lot more going on than we see, obviously. So with that already in me, part of me, and also the reverence I held for the birth blood and the placenta, it wasn't a very difficult sideways step to include the rest of the blood. Although, interestingly, that was never included in midwifery training or nursing training that I did as a younger woman. Nothing to do with the magic or specialness or shamanic dimensions or spiritual dimensions of the menstrual cycle, just the mechanics, which, to be fair, is the only way they ever really taught about birth as well. So, but I started my journey with sacred blood as a midwife and with an awareness of the cycles and stuff that I might not have had if I wasn't a midwife. And then it's my life now basically my focus around blood is as an educator. And I would say I am a priestess of the sacred blood or to sacred blood, and I am in service to our sacred blood as an educator. And then in my own role, in my own life, with my own blood, I would be what I would define, I would have been practicing as a blood witch, which would mean that I was using my blood for prayers and connection to the earth. I was meditating with my blood, using it in different ways to access information and using it in ritual. So basically, that's my connection to the blood, and I miss it dearly. I've been post-menopause for about 8 years, and to be honest, I was really worried about going into menopause because I was so connected to my blood, so obsessed with my blood, that I wondered, how could I possibly be without my blood? But, you know, that's a whole other story. And as a midwife, I thought there couldn't be anything more transformational in a woman's life than giving birth until I went through menopause. So it's something amazing to actually look forward to in our lives. So we have 40 years or so with our menstrual cycle, and then we have probably another 40 or 50 years without it. And it's a different experience, but it's no less anything. In fact, there's a whole other story that goes on and more amazing capabilities that until you're living them, it's hard to imagine. So yeah, that's my journey with the blood.
Well, okay, so I have I don't know how many follow-up questions to that, but let me start with what you just finished with, so and go backwards if I manage.
Yeah.
Which is because I asked this question from all the wisdom keepers that I have interviewed so far, that I've spoken to so far, and you've just brought it out right in the beginning, so no need to wait till the end for this question. And it was very touching the way you said it about how you miss it dearly because you were so connected to it. And this is something that I have realized for myself, and I say to people, although I haven't crossed that threshold, that portal into menopause yet, that I know that I'm headed that way, close enough, much closer than not, and that each time I bleed, it's like, like I don't want to miss an opportunity, you know, to really be with that blood. But this is the first time I hear from someone saying how much they miss it. And so, and I know it's a whole world, the postmenopausal and the crone stage, but what would you say to the women? Because this is one of the heartbreaks that I've had when I've approached women for submissions for this project, and they're like, oh, well, I'm not bleeding anymore, so, you know, like it doesn't apply to me. And it's like, but not having already crossed into the menopause stage, I can't say from my own experience, but yes, it does. But I know it does. How can it not? Like, this is imprinted in me. What would be your advice, or what's your wisdom around menopausal or postmenopausal women who are no longer bleeding, or just highly irregularly bleeding? How can they stay connected to the sacredness of our menstrual blood, or continue with that energy?
Yeah, well, rather than be connected to the actual sacred blood, what we can be is forever connected, which we are whether we're paying attention or not, to the sacred cycle of which the blood is a part. So the cycle continues. And so post-menopausally or perimenopausally, when everything's all over the place, we keep a cycle going, and the cycle is the lunar cycle, the phases of the moon, which you probably know, prior to electricity, the story goes that all women bled on the dark moon and ovulated at the full moon. So theoretically, it's just a continuation of the same cycle and in alignment with the moon, like everybody else who isn't menstruating. So the other thing, there's two lovely sayings I want to say. So this is a First Nations American one. At Menarche, a girl meets her power. Through menstruation, she practices her power. And at menopause, she becomes her power. So, you know, the menstrual cycle and our years of cycling with our blood are preparation for our postmenopausal years. And I've learned some more things about postmenopause. It's not straight into crone. Crone is the old woman, the old wise woman, the winter of our lives. But menopause happens on average at 50, 51. So that's like halfway. And so we don't go straight from mother into crone because we live longer now. So after menopause, we shift seasonally into, so we have maiden is the spring of our lives, mother is the summer of our lives, and marga, which is the word I was taught, and there can be many other words, queen, matriarch, sovereign woman, enchantress, witch, sorceress, all kinds of names which give you the same impression about the energy. So Maga, M-A-G-A, was what I was taught, which is the female version of Magus, M-A-G-U-S, which is the male version of that age after 50, and that means magician. So Maga is the autumn season of our lives that precedes crone, and autumn is the harvest. So postmenopausally, we are in the harvest season of our lives. So the summer is the preparation for the harvest, the autumn, which holds all the fruits of our labor the whole life so far that we now have to share. So postmenopausally, when a woman becomes her power, she has a responsibility to share her wisdom that she's learned. And so the other little saying is around how, I might not get this exactly right, but that at menopause, we become wise women because we hold our wise blood within. We no longer need to bleed to see it. We know it and we hold it within. So it's not like game over. It's next level of the game. And it's also a very different experience, like emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And I think the easiest way to explain it is that with the menstrual cycle, I'm going to draw this in a linear way, but we know it's not linear, right? And we go up with ovulation and down with blood and up and down. And there's no, up is not better than down, and down is not bad. It's just up or down. And so we fluctuate from that to that over and over throughout our menstrual cycle. So quite a, long distance between up and down. Postmenopausally, that shrinks. So the cycle is still there with the moon, but it's not as high or as low. So there is not the intensity of the high of ovulation, nor the intensity of the depth of bleeding post-menopause, but still the cycle. So that actually makes us more available. And that, I believe, is what part of the postmenopausal woman's job is, to be available to share her harvest and work within her community. So after bleeding, there's a whole new story.
Wow. Okay. So as a couple times while you were speaking, I got like shivers in my body. So that's my indicator that like, whoo. And so basically, this is like very concrete, very practical, that a woman during peri and postmenopause, she can stay connected through the lunar cycle, that she still has a cycle because she's connected to the moon, that we're all, made of liquid. And so how could we not be, those in men's bodies included, and that we can connect to our blood within, that it's just not a release. And then that's where the wisdom part comes in. That's amazing. And
we can still do the rituals. So the blood ritual, the letting go blood ritual, would be done at the dark moon. And then the new moon would be similar to what you would be doing spiritually after, when your blood has started. So like a blood prayer, from my perspective, what the spiritual practice of menstruation and making blood prayers is like a combination of a dark moon prayer where you let go of whatever no longer serves, and a new moon prayer where you call in the new things you need, or the healed version of whatever you're letting go of. So that's what a blood prayer is. letting go and calling in. So post-menopause and everybody else who doesn't have the menstrual cycle just does the same prayers, dark moon and new moon. And also, similarly, the same energy of ovulation is at full moon. So prior to the full moon, we can give thanks for dedicating the energy of intensity and fullness and full bloom and full growth, which is what the full moon is, which is what ovulation is, to whatever projects or any kind of thing we want to dedicate that energy to. So same practices, just with the moon. So you don't have to, it's not like you can't do the spells or the blood start work anymore. You do it, but it's more refined and less personal.
Yes. Yes. Less personal, more transpersonal. Yes. That totally hits like
makes sense.
Bullseye in me somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, because they don't have their own blood anymore, or for example, for those in men's bodies who may want to also join in such prayers and offerings. So is there something to offer, or is it just more internal and more energetic?
Well, same as the moon. So same thing. So you can be doing that in your family with your children as well. Like, I mean, I would suggest that that's what people do, the moon prayers, dark moon, new moon, and full moon. So same for people in men's bodies. If they want to replicate the menstrual cycle, it's right there with the lunar cycle. Just do the same things at the same times. Ovulation equals full moon. Day one of blood equals new moon.
And is there something they are also menopausal women, do they offer something like, I don't know, I know that I've heard from other wisdom keepers that you collect things from the earth, and it's you make an elixir or some kind of potion from that, or I don't know, have you heard of anything in your trajectory with different lineages?
Using pomegranate juice as a red liquid and as a symbol of the story of creation and seasons and all of that in the pomegranate story with Demeter and Persephone. So yeah, I mean, like, it's all about intention, as we know, and you can use the things that are meaningful and symbolic of whatever it is that you want to do. But you can also just be really simple and not necessarily dramatic. And like, for example, if you forgot and you were out at the shops and you remembered, oh no, shit, it's the new moon, I need to make my new moon prayers, you could just speak them in your mind. So that's so, like, we don't need to make these things so hard we won't do it.
Yeah. Perfect. Beautiful. Wow. Okay. This is so great. This is huge range for everybody. This is like where I get excited. Okay. So I want to rewind to two things. I'm holding my fingers like this here. Like, remember two things. So one was about priestess. That you said that you consider yourself a priestess of the blood, of the sacred blood or menstrual blood. Could you talk about a little bit more about what that means and how that has evolved in you? Because I know you have been with different lineages, and so yeah.
Well, a priestess to me is somebody who is consciously living a spiritual path. And it could be a priestess of the earth, a priestess of the moon, a priestess of the sisterhood, a priestess of the blood, whatever. So it's a practitioner of a spiritual practice. So it's that's how I see it. And I also see it in terms of serving at various altars. So I would call a rite of passage an altar of transformation. So a midwife, for example, is a priestess at the birth altar, in my way of understanding and explaining things. And so a menstrual educator is a priestess of the blood, or a ceremonialist could be a priestess at menarche or whatever. So, just another word to bring in to explain that this is serious shit, you know. This is not a game. This is for real, and it's about it's about walking your talk and living your ideals and practicing them and teaching them. So I think I would use the word priestess in the same way as I would midwife or, you know, circle leader or, you know, all that sort of stuff. Like you're a priestess of the sacred blood, as far as I can see.
Thank you. This is so practical. I'm a Taurus also, so I'm extremely practical. And this is like, yes, a priestess is a midwife. You midwife this for the collective good through you. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep it simple and real. You know, I think in our worlds, there are so many tangents you can go off in and so many ways to express things that sometimes don't even sound like they make any sense. So I'm all for practical and grounded earth wisdom. And I would say that the women the earth needs now, which is a very important thing to be thinking about, are earth priestesses. Those who honor and serve the mother, the great mother, the earth, the goddess, however you want to call her, and who are strong and soft and resilient and adaptable. And that all comes through a eyes wide open spiritual practice of menstruation. So priestess is, an earth priestess would be a description, based on what we're talking about, of the kind of woman the earth needs now. Because we're going into, you know, unknown territory. We're already in unknown territory. And we need to be in alignment with the cycles and our bodies. And the menstrual cycle is the way there.
Beautiful. So this is also a question I usually ask at the end. And like, it seems like with you, we're just going reverse. So that's great. I love it. Yeah, we are going through a very different time in history for humanity. And so how does the offering of the sacred blood or connection to menstrual blood, you mentioned the cycles, if you could zero into menstrual blood, if there's something specific to say around that, how that either supports us to get through it, to go through it, not get through it as in like tolerate, but like really harvest what there is to harvest from it, and how does it affect, like, you know, it's not one way, it's not, you know, that by us connecting to our blood and connecting to maybe offerings of blood or this midwifery approach to being a priestess of the blood or earth priestess, that how does that then also affect what we're going through humanity? So, you know, whichever way or both ways that you want to question.
Well, I think what's going on in our world right now is the death throes of the patriarchy. And it's messy. And it's going to get messier. And the patriarchy, what that means is the patriarchal culture. And the patriarchal culture is fixated on youth and beauty and production and achievement and availability 24/7 and no rest. So we've already realized that's not sustainable and is actually poisoning, literally and figuratively, everything and everybody. So one of the biggest things about now in our world is we need to figure out how to live properly. And the clues for how to live an earth-honoring and sustainable life are hiding in plain view in the menstrual cycle. And I just love that so much, because imagine in our world that is also suffering from the menstrual taboo, which is an age-old, dreadful situation that people don't even realize is a thing. that the answer is the greatest taboo, which I love. So what I mean by the clues for how to live an earth-honoring and sustainable life are hiding in plain view in the menstrual cycle is that the menstrual cycle teaches us about the cycle. Like there is one cycle and everything goes through a cycle. It's the same cycle, just different speeds. And the cycle goes birth, growth, full bloom, harvest, decay, death, rebirth, growth, full bloom, harvest, decay, death, over and over and over, just different lengths of time. So within that, like, you know, there's so many little lines that we, you know, you reap what you sow. If you don't plant anything in spring, you've got nothing to eat later on, for example. Whatever you do at the beginning of something plays out the whole cycle and sets up your harvest or lack of. So basically, the menstrual cycle shows us the way to live. That's one thing. And also the potency that happens and can happen and will happen when women all align with their cycles, like figure it out, like there's no point in ignoring it or overriding it, like it's a thing and it's you're supposed to be part of it, that we might all realign with each other and the moon. And if we all do our blood prayers together, then serious, serious magic can happen and will happen and does happen. So global blood prayers would be one of the things that would be possible. And it, you know, we may not resynchronize altogether, but whenever we're bleeding, if that's part of our mission to do blood prayers and to let go of all that no longer serves and to call in the new healed versions and ways of being, that's what needs to happen in the world. So with that, as part of the aim of co-creating a positive menstrual culture for our world, then half the population won't be hating on themselves, because the menstrual cycle is currently, as I said, a big taboo. And what that has resulted in is menstrual shame. And menstrual shame is the pandemic that has had us in its claws for the several thousands of years and has been impacting everybody really badly. So menstrual shame leads to body shame, and body shame leads to low self-esteem, and low self-esteem leads to all manner of wounded behaviors, including eating disorders and self-harm. And menstrual shame leads to risky and dangerous sexual decision-making, which is dreadful for our teenagers, dreadful. So menstrual shame is something that we need to get rid of. It's like so bad for us, and it's so bad in that people don't even realize they have it. But in that little sentence I just gave you, menstrual shame leads to body shame, leads to low self-esteem, etc., I think everybody could probably find themselves somewhere on that without realizing that it's menstrual shame that's what is at the foundation of it. So, in fact, I've just created an e-course called Snake Medicine, Shedding Menstrual Shame, which is an education about it all and several processes and deep inquiry to help you shed menstrual shame, because that's part of the big work of our time, to shed menstrual shame. Because once we do that, then, you know, we won't have low self-esteem, we won't have body shame, and we'll be in our full power. And that is what is required now. Everybody in their full power, not power over, power within. And women haven't had a chance to do that or be that with menstrual shame. And menstrual shame, you know, it's just another clue, because anything to do with the feminine and women that is put down or made a joke of or feared is a clue that it holds power.
I could end now, but I won't, because I still have many, many questions. But like that was like a that.
Yeah, that.
Yes, this taboo, and it's like, okay, for millennia, half the population has been bleeding, and yet it's still, I mean, I understand there was the whole like, okay, if you're bleeding, then the tigers will sniff you out kind of thing, and then maybe like we needed to like, you know, attend to that in a different way at those times. Those times are long gone for a while now. And still that didn't make it bad, but I could understand that made it dangerous. I mean, there are, you know, okay, biological arguments on that front, but yeah, that's kind of long and gone for some hundreds of years, if not thousands, depending where you live. And so, yeah, for me and for the project, I only realized when I started this project that basically, I mean, I knew still about taboo because I've lived in many different places, and including India for 9 years, where like, you know, the whole like it gets wrapped up in also in religious and also in other religions, not just Hinduism, but you know, the whole like don't touch, don't go to the temple, don't, you know, and that kind of thing.
Well, that approach is in the roots of all major religions.
Go for it. Go.
Yeah, I don't have the list in front of me, but it's very present. So women have been, bleeding women are blamed for souring wine, rotting meat, failing crops. Men are not supposed to touch them, definitely not sleep in the same bed. And yeah, it's this, women who are bleeding are impure and dirty. And, you know, like
yeah, so
a lot of people still think
about?
Yeah, well,
What's
because of the power. It's all part of like what happened. So I've written this wonderful thing called the Her Story as opposed to His Story. And it's all about what the patriarchal culture has done to the feminine. And maybe what we can do is put this on the website, this Her Story, so that people can do a little bit of a catch up. Because if ever you want to understand why we are where we are and what's going on, all you need to do is look where we come from. And we've come from a place that has totally oppressed the feminine for thousands and thousands of years. So much so that people don't even realize the impact anymore. And the blood is big power. There's an awesome quote here I'll just read to you. This is from this beautiful book written by a Australian woman, part of her PhD, about menstrual shame and the patriarchy. Menstrual shame is a core patriarchal organizing principle that instills and perpetuates male dominance and female subordination. And menstrual shame impacts how we give birth. Yeah. So it's pretty bad.
And to make it clear that male dominance is male in female or male bodies, it's just the masculine dominance. Is any dominance over another is going to result into an imbalance, period, whatever body it's living in, because, you know, there's as much female shame in men's bodies, like for them to shame their own feminine qualities or energies. And so it's nobody wins with this. It's not about whether you have a vagina. Nobody wins in this dynamic. Yeah. And so I wanted to go back to this, that the taboo, and so I'm aware of it in my mind, but it's starting with this project and realizing like, okay, if menarche means becoming a woman, or now you're in the, you know, circle of sisters, the womanhood thing, even if you're young, you know, okay, it's a rite of passage. And menstrual blood means shame or taboo or you know, burden or something. Then menarche equals woman equals shame equals burden. Like there's just a 1 + 1 = 2 there. That's so basic. Like, yeah, like becoming a woman means there's something to be ashamed about. There's a burden to the exact same thing that correlates to me becoming a woman.
Exactly. So that's exactly right. And so the other thing that happens there is what happens at a rite of passage. So a rite of passage, which menarche is one, is a time of great transformation when either healing can happen or rewounding. And so what we see mostly at Menarche are girls having experiences that actually don't welcome them to womanhood and teach them about the menstrual cycle and how to look after their bodies during the bleeding time and during the rest of the cycle, etc. That isn't usually what happens. What usually happens is, here's the pads, put them in the bin, don't talk about it to anybody, keep it quiet, carry on regardless, and whatever you do, don't leak. So straight from there, so basically the way a rite of passage works is that whatever happens or doesn't happen, whatever's said or not said, teaches us, the person going through the rite of passage, so imagine average age 13-year-old, it teaches her on a subliminal level, which means she doesn't even realize she's being taught, how her culture values the next role she's going into, so woman, because the same thing happens here at childbirth and at menopause, but let's focus on Menarche. So what happens teaches her how her culture values woman and therefore how she has to behave to be accepted by the culture. Now, mostly women are not welcome to womanhood in a positive way. And so they are instantly burdened with this taboo and menstrual shame and have to negotiate the whole thing somehow with that. Now, there are some cultures, rare, that honor it, and there are some people now who are changing it. There are mothers who have daughters who are saying, no way, I am not going to have my daughter have the same experience that I did. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to change that for her. So that is happening now, you know, like they even using red liquid now on pad ads instead of blue, which was to hide the shame of blood. Unbelievable. So
I never thought about that. That's true.
Yes, it's terrible. It was blue liquid.
That's true. I'm visualizing the thing that they pour on to show how much stays on, and it never clicked that, yeah, they use blue, not red.
Yeah. So this is all part of the brainwashing that happens around all of this stuff to reinforce that blood is gross, can't even look at it. And, you know, and in those ads, they usually use a beaker, right? So it looks like a
yeah, it's a beaker. It's like this.
So there are women who are changing it now, and like you're doing what you're doing, and there's women who are all around the world doing this, reclaiming feminine knowledge and wisdom and power, and reclaiming the menstrual cycle, and not a moment too soon. So this is part of the work of our time to do this. And so what we know happens when we have a positive rite of passage and when girls are welcome to womanhood in the way they're actually hardwired to expect is going to happen, like, to be fair, in the same way that when a baby is born, it is hardwired to expect that its mother is going to look after it. So at Menarche, a girl is hardwired to expect that somebody, most likely her mother, is going to teach her about the cycle and what to do and how to look after herself. But that's not happening. I was part of a group of menstrual educators that did a big research project called the Waratah Project in Australia. And we got information from about 3,500 women and girls about menstruation and menopause for those who'd been through it or going through it. And we got some dreadful statistics, but we knew we were going to get these. Like, anybody who works in the field of the menstrual cycle, menstruation, knows what's going on. It's terrible. But some of the statistics that I can recall off the top of my head, there were about 34% of women who, when they started their period, didn't know what it was. So there were 9% of them who had absolutely no idea. They thought they were bleeding and dying. And then the other 23, 24% they kind of thought they might have known, but they didn't. Now that's dreadful, you know, so we can fix that straight away. We can improve menstrual education. And another statistic which is horrible was about from the girls in the age group 11 to 16. So they would have all just started, or maybe a year or two or three into it. And there was 69% of them, so that's like almost all of them, didn't like anything about their menstrual cycle. So we know where that's going. That's going to impact their entire lives. And when we ignore our menstrual cycle, she does whatever she can to get our attention. And mostly what that looks like is pathology, which could be pain or anything, you know, lots of worse things than that. Because the menstrual cycle is a cycle that runs our life. And if we don't go along with it, then, you know, it ends in tears. So the menstrual cycle, the taboo, everything, I can't even remember how we started this last little rant, but
it was about the menarche.
oh yeah,
And actually, when you started talking about it, I started crying, because it was, you know, that the mothers who are going and saying, you know, I want this to be different, and that, you know, that it will not be like it was for me. And I know that my mother did her best with that. She's now 77, and so she comes from a even before your generation, but she comes from Bolivia. And I know that, you know, there are people watching who are not from the developing West or the North, Western European or North Americas. And, you know, she had no idea what was happening to her when she got her menstruation, and it was very scary. And so she wanted me to know. I was 9, and she started seeing so it was really early.
wow.
And she started seeing the signs, and she was like, how do I talk to a 9-year-old about this? So she just left me a little book under my pillow, everything I ever wanted to know and didn't ask. And something like that was the title. I still remember what it looked like. Very basic, no frills, just gray and, you know, very basic color, and just very, and I remember, like, you know, in with a lot of like heaviness coming to me and asking me like a week later or something, did you find something under your pillow I'd left for you? And I was like, yes, like, and she was like, do you have any questions? Is there anything you want to talk about? And she started crying. She started crying because she was like, you know, I mean, she didn't say this, but I know I'm projecting, but I sense, and maybe this is a conversation I can have with her, actually, because she's still alive. So I could have this conversation now that I think about it. That she came and was like, you know, struggling herself to meet me there, because she was never met there. And so how, you know, there's no modeling, there's no teacher. She doesn't, you know, didn't have any access to any of this stuff, but she knew she didn't want me to start my bleed not knowing and thinking I'm going to die, because I have no idea why I'm bleeding between my legs. And I'm so young that I probably don't have any friends, which was the truth. Didn't have any friends who had started bleeding. I didn't know about this. And so this was her way of doing the best. And of course, you know, the whole sacredness of it, or the whole cycles of it, or the, you know, all that was like not even, you know, like in the realm of possibilities for her and her understanding, her connection. But it was just like, just don't be scared, you know, like you're not going to die kind of thing. So I wanted to share this story because I know that there are mothers and fathers, and some fathers who are raising their daughters on their own. And I have a submission from one beautiful man that I know in Israel, who's raising, I mean, the mother is around, but because of the culture there, and her beliefs, that she's not planning to talk to her daughters about menstruation. So it's on him, because he does want them to know. He has 3 daughters. And, you know, that was his sharing of like, you know, how am I going to do this? And what do I want to pass on to them as someone in a man's body? So this isn't just about mothers, but I know it primarily does fall on them. But for parents in general, to connect to their young menarching daughters or nephews, nieces, or, you know, whoever is around, whoever they're connected to and that doesn't have somebody else to do that for them or with them. I know you've worked a lot with mothers and daughters or menarche. That what would be some tips or jewels to pass on to them as they journey in that initiation for themselves too?
Yeah, exactly. Well, from this research, we know that the most likely place a girl is going to start her period is at home. And the person that has the biggest impact on them, like what she says, is the mother. So it is very important. And of course, if the mother's not there, then it would be whoever the mother equivalent is. So that might be the father because the mother's not there. And the second likely place to get their period for the first time is at school. So what that means is the parents have the responsibility to prepare their daughters for it, because you can't rely on school. You know, basically that's an anatomy and physiology lesson and wouldn't happen. And by 9, for example, it's probably a high school science lesson. So it's the parents' responsibility to do that. And there's time. So usually what happens is breast buds form first and some pubic hair. And so once it's breast buds and pubic hair, it's probably within a year that the period will start. So there's the clues. So you've got some time to get ready. And there's some lovely books around now, more than just that little one that you got. So if books are the way, then that's what there are resources available. But the other thing is that in parenting at menarche, what arises for us, what your story highlighted beautifully, is our own experience. So what also needs to happen in preparation for preparing our daughters for menarche is the healing work for the mum. And, you know, that's big. And what that requires is her to recall her menarche story, like remember it, and ask of the experience, what did this teach me about how my culture valued woman? So you can imagine some of the examples of that, and will include hide it, don't talk about it, it's not important, don't make a fuss, blah, blah, blah. So that teaches, so then just put woman in front of that. Women are not important. Don't make a fuss, don't draw any attention, blah, 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 which is also so mixed up because you're supposed to draw all the attention you possibly can. But anyway, so the healing opportunity there is to recall the story, figure out what brainwashing happened about how you're supposed to behave as a woman, and then prepare, so this is for the mother, prepare a new message for her inner maiden. Because the inner maiden is always there forever. She doesn't go away. And she is usually in the driver's seat in her most wounded version all the time. So in the healing work to prepare to welcome our daughters to menarche, we need to do our own healing first. So what that means is to prepare a new message for our maiden, our inner maiden, like, your body is perfect. Your menstrual cycle is an indicator of your health. Like, you know, whatever it is, the main thing that the mother needs to remember or replace a negative perspective with, then she can welcome her daughter to womanhood from a healed perspective, from a healed place, rather than a wounded place. And as I said before, rites of passage can be a place for healing or a place for rewounding or continuing the wound. And the other thing about rites of passage, and particularly the menstrual cycle and menarche and childbirth and menopause actually, is that we're having the experiences that we have, whatever our story is, but also whatever the story is of our red thread or our mother line. So it's in rites of passage where this shows up. And what it, or in life, so basically there's a theme in each of our mother lines, our red thread, a theme of some form of generational trauma that gets passed down from mother to daughter to daughter to blah, 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 all the way. And then how we experience, say, for example, our menarche or having a baby is the modern current version of whatever that red thread wound is, that generational trauma. So things run in families, as we know, and they play out in our menstrual cycle and our rites of passage. So when all it takes is one person in that mother line, in that red thread, to say, no, this generational trauma stops with me. I am not passing it on any further. I will do the inner work required to heal that and let go of whatever it is and call in whatever I need so that I will not perpetuate this trauma. So that's what can happen also when mothers welcome their daughters to menarche consciously and at the same time do their own healing. So it's really, really, really important.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to go back to the well, is there, I actually want to ask this question. I'm like, I know there's so much, it's still about menarche. Is there like a top 2 things or top 3 things that of the message? Of course, there's the delivery of having gone through her own healing and the mother figure or whoever is passing on these messages. But is there something that's really important, like key, 3 sentences kind of thing that encapsulate what this young budding beautiful flower it needs to know or be grounded in? Or is that kind of just, it depends?
Oh, no, there's some basic stuff that she needs to know, and then it's how that plays out in her life. So she needs to learn about the menstrual cycle, like actually what's going on and when and how and what to do about that. So to describe the menstrual cycle in terms of it having 2 halves and 4 weeks, and how it goes basically along the same energy as the seasons of the earth, and we have internal seasons, and that how we look after ourselves or not during our bleeding will impact the whole cycle. So there's basic practices like that. And also the gifts of the cycle, like, so when you're bleeding, you are intuitive and grounded and connected to earth wisdom and able to solve problems that you hadn't been able to before. And at ovulation, a woman is the most articulate, charismatic, present, amazing a human being can be. So it's a good idea to teach the girls what the adult females around her should be doing, which is run their lives around their menstrual cycle, plan their lives around their cycle. Like, so for example, if you need to present something at work where you need to convince everybody about your idea, do it when you're ovulating, because everybody will be eating out of your hands when you're ovulating. You are just so juicy and dripping with feminine power that whatever you do will work. And when you have a problem you need to solve or something you're not sure about what to do, then what you can do is bleed on it. So you take the situation, problem, question into your menstrual cycle, into your blood, and just have your bleeding and see what arises to the question or the problem or whatever. So teaching girls that sort of stuff, is really, really useful. And also, the other thing that the menstrual cycle does is connects us to the earth, which most people are not connected to the earth. So teaching the girls to be connected to their cycle, and because we are all as if the earth. So the earth goes through the same cycle. So helping them to connect to their cycle right from the beginning, and then realizing the connection that gives them to the earth would save a lot of problems.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. Okay. This is that way. And there are, of course, lots of resources. I believe you also have some for getting in touch with that to begin with. So how can you pass on something that you're not even aware of? But
Exactly. Yeah, you need
yeah,
to learn. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What I wanted to go back to was the bleeding together, cycling together thing, the new moon, full moon thing, and this is for me an amazing thing that the day I started this initiative, this project, this movement, it was like a call. Something came the night before. I did a 2-hour webinar on blood mysteries and just talking about menstrual blood. And in the morning, I woke up and I was like, "This has got to be a global thing." And it was like so strong, it was so powerful. And I was like, "Boom, boom, boom, boom!" The name, the website, the who's gonna design the look, like everything, just. And that was May 22nd, this year, 2020. And a month later, I discovered that on that same day, there was the first offering. It was new moon, a Gemini new moon. It was the first global offering that had been organized by a group of people that had like 9,000 people in their group. And I don't know how many actually offered, but a bunch did, mostly in the Americas, some in Europe. And that they're going to keep that going for 9 months. And so I was like, really? And I really felt like it's the earth that's calling us. The earth itself is like saying, remember,
Mm.
remember how powerful this is. Remember, this is part of me, the earth. Remember, you are part of me. The reclaim, stand for this. And also the vibration that they're offering their blood, onto the land. And it was new moon, and that vibration, I really honestly feel that vibration also reached me. It's not just the earth, but it's also whoever else is now standing and offering and aligning with this. And so we started to do that with this project also to offer the new moon. So even if a woman's not bleeding, we've shared ways that they can, if they are still bleeding but not bleeding on the new moon, that they can preserve their blood and still offer it on the new moon. But if they're not bleeding, then they can also offer elixirs or concoctions, or again, they can just do a prayer without offering anything, and it's still totally valid. But I wanted to highlight that this movement of offering on the new moon, or even if you're not actually bleeding on the new moon, that it's coming. Like there's thousands of people on that right now, and I know that that's going to turn into hundreds of thousands and millions eventually. Like it's just a matter of time. So it's okay that sometimes things move at the speed of matter, as I say, and sometimes there's lightning that happens, and that's fine. So what is it about offering our blood to the earth? There's a alchemy there.
Oh, there is indeed. There's lots of, and to be fair, she's expecting it. Like that's where it's supposed to be going, and it does actually end up there too, regardless of how anybody does, consciously or not, care for what they do with their blood. It does end up in the earth, and the earth's expecting our blood, like she's expecting our placentas, like she's expecting our wee and our poo and our bodies. So it's part of the reciprocal relationship we have with the earth. So that, and that when we put our blood onto the earth, so pour our menstrual blood onto the earth, and for those people who are wondering, how do you do that? Well, you've got to use some sort of a situation where you collect your blood by using reusable pads soaking in water, or menstrual cup, or sponge where you collect the blood, and you do your blood prayers, as we've been saying, and you pour your blood onto the actual earth. Then what you're doing is putting your DNA in that earth. And then there's this thing that happens, which is described in quantum physics, of non-local connection. So when your DNA is in the earth, then part of you is there, and you care about that earth. And so if all the women are returning their blood to the earth, and one of the things that happens is it makes them care about that part of the earth, then everything's going to change.
Yes. I just want to share, like, it's my lived experience, and I'm sure it's many who are watching, but since we're speaking, I just want to name that I had been, I actually drink my blood, and I had been saving my blood for a couple of months in order to take pictures of the blood in my hands for the website. And, you know, I don't bleed so much. I bleed for 2 days. And so I needed to accumulate like 2 months worth to take the shot, because it's, you know, seconds before the liquid goes through. And so I did this twice, because the first time the pictures didn't come out well. And I did it in the same spot. And it's a spot that's next to my home, and it's moss. It's underneath a tree. I live in Finland. It's underneath a tree, and it's moss where it's the kind of moss that grows after a tree has died, and it grows over the tree trunk, and that takes a long time to happen. And it's really like, oof. And I had walked by this spot so many times. It's next to my home. I mean, it's like, it's on our property. It's like, but next to our structural home. And it's where our stairs are, like right next to it. And I walked by so many times, and then I was looking for a spot. Where am I going to take this picture? And I saw the moss, and I was like, wow, this is like, you know, that receiving, that earthly, that is covered around the tree. And I was like, this is the spot. This is actually, this is a temple that I just haven't noticed. Okay. So I went and I did the first offering, and it didn't work out. So then I waited for the next cycles, and then I did the next offering, and I swear it is not mental. It's not like it's in my mind, but I just feel like there's this cord, there's this link with this spot that I cannot walk past it without looking and feeling enchanted. Like I feel like I'm being like this, drawn into it, and I'm sleeping, and it's, you know, there, and I can feel it, and like there's this bond there, and it's my lived experience. It's not here. It isn't. I've offered my blood in many places, but because I've offered my blood there now several times, there's just this really embodied physical awareness of this place. And I just feel like, yeah, there's a magic there that is beyond something that can be seen or explained. I'm doing my best to explain it, but it's felt. It's felt.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's no way that you would let anybody do anything to that tree and that moss now.
No, like we're like, oh my God, this is our new temple, outside temple. Like, you know, like, yeah, like I want to go there and sit there, and I want to like just be there, where before it was like, I just was walking by it, like, yeah, it's another spot. Yeah.
So therein lay a beautiful example of the power of the blood with intentional prayers to return it to the earth, and the impact that could have.
Yes. Yes, and this is part of the project also, our Sacred Blood project, where one of my dreams from the beginning, that May 22nd, I wanted a map, and I wanted blood drops on different places on the earth where people who are making submissions are offering their blood or vibrating with their blood. Maybe making art with their blood, where blood is vibrating in its potency and its sacredness, and it's being honored that way. And the land knows that. The land knows that. Of course it knows that. And so I want that shown on a map. So it's coming soon. Yeah, I want it like, okay, you usually look at a globe and you're trying to find, you know, rivers or names of countries or mountain ranges. Find blood as well. Like, like basic. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Is there anything else that oh, actually, about this offering, the DNA, that there's I just wanted to highlight that there's that, you know, sacred reciprocity that happens, that I become the earth and the earth becomes me also. I mean, there's this, you know, feedback loop, I feel.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the medicine for our times, you know, disconnection. That's the medicine.
Yeah. Okay, one last question. I know you've worked with different women from different places in the world, different ages, and I know you've studied or traveled, walked with different lineages, and also from midwifery to shamanic. I mean, the huge range. Is there any difference between, you know, different cultures or different? I mean, of course, there's different ways to punish or shame. Those are nuances, the details. But are there any differences around bleeding, cultural or generational, or, you know, is there any
Well,
highlights, anything, or is
certainly
it basically?
generational, certainly generational, because, you know, of that whole red thread thing. But I actually have seen no difference really with women around the blood. And I think that's where we can feel and see the sisterhood in its truest healed way, that we're all connected through our blood. And, you know, you might bleed for 2 days and she bleeds for 7, and you might have 50 mils and she does 100, but it's the same thing. So it's the experience we have that, and it'll be varied, the pathology will be varied, etc. But I feel like across the world, in my experience with the women from all different ages that I've met, that's the source, the heart of sisterhood. It's the
Yeah,
same with
that's,
birth too, you know, like, so in the conscious birthing communities around the world, so in the conscious menstruating world, everybody's on the same page. Same for birth, you know, like there's the conscious way to do it and the unconscious. So I see a similarity there. I think it's
yeah.
the sisterhood of the blood is alive and well.
The Sisterhood of the Blood. Does that? I'm like, that's got to be a name of a book or a series of something. I don't know. Like, I like.
It's the name for us. It's the thing. It's the sisterhood of the blood.
Oh, right. Is it okay if I use this?
Yeah.
Do I have your permission? Yeah. I mean, I'll credit you totally, but yeah, the Sisterhood of the Blood. Right. And of course, again, that does still apply to those in men's bodies, because there's a sister living in them, just like there's a brother living in us. We all have the masculine and the feminine. And so really want to also invite everybody, fathers, brothers, lovers, friends, coaches, teachers, that they can also be part of that sisterhood in blood. Even if they don't bleed, they can support it. We need that. We need that. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share from, I know there's so much wisdom, we could go on forever. Yeah, I leave it
Well,
up to you there.
there was another thing. One of the questions that you did propose was what role did I imagine men had to play in
Yes.
a positive menstrual culture? And um, yeah, I just think that what we could hope for would be respect and honor and care and love, in the same way that that same way of being helps around childbirth. So how a man can be with a woman in childbirth is similar for the menstrual cycle and menopause. So support, care, love, help, etc., but respect.
Wow, the way you just put that, that really puts it, because I know that my mother's time, that wasn't necessarily the thing that men would be a part of it. In fact, men were like excluded, like this is a no man's during childbirth, you know, and in the movies you see the man like having a drink and like shaking and like what's going on in there, like, you know, having is everything going to be okay kind of thing. And that's evolved, not everywhere, granted, not everywhere, but it has evolved. And there is a culture around men supporting and being there at childbirth, and being with the pregnancy. And, you know, that has it, that has anchored in enough, and not nearly enough, but enough that we can say that has shifted. And the same thing, we can use the same hope, an analogy for menstrual. for bleeding time and for menarche, and for the whole cycle, the whole bleeding cycle and menopause. It's, yeah, that totally makes sense. All of a sudden it clicked. Like, if that could change of childbirth, why can't it change for the whole cycle?
Exactly. Just have to make the connection between the menstrual cycle and birth.
Yeah, yeah. And that, you know, I know that with birth, it's like, okay, this is my child. The man can say, this is my child, or, you know, but this is also your partner. And she may have your child or has already had your child, or, you know, that's, yeah, just expand it out.
It's part of it. Yeah, it's part of
Yeah.
what that means. Yeah.
Wow, great. Wow, that's great support. Great support. Thank you so much for all this wisdom. I know you mentioned the snake, and you mentioned only also her story.
Yeah.
And if you want to mention anything else, I know you have a book that's coming out now, and that's really exciting. That's how I found out about you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that book is called Blood Rights, RITES, and Blood Rights, RIGHTS. So Blood Rights, the spiritual practice of menstruation. So that's nearly ready to be born. I'm doing the final kind of read through the words. And I've got a book called Becoming a Woman. That's a guide for girls approaching menstruation. And lots of stuff about pregnancy and birth, and an e-course about menopause as well, called Autumn Woman, Harvest Queen, and an e-course about pregnancy called Pregnancy: The Inner Journey. So e-courses and books, and they're all available to have a look at and buy on my website, janehardwickecollings.com. And also there's another website all about the School of Shamanic Womancraft that I founded. So that's schoolofshamanicwomancraft.com. And I'm on social media, quite active on Instagram and Facebook. And you can find me there, Jane Hardwicke Collings. So that's all that.
So in this interview, we'll have your websites listed, so that would be easy for people to get in touch with you. And also we will feature your resources, and what's coming and what's already out there in our resource section, so people can go now to check on the resource section, and there'll be links there. So definitely we'll be including that.
Awesome.
This has been such an honor, such a blessing, so many aha moments. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so so grateful that you agreed to talk and to take on the responsibility of passing it on.
Thank you for asking.
And now it's everybody else's who's listened to responsibility, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. As soon as possible and always. Kind of, or else, actually.
Or what? Sorry?
Or else.
Or else. Yeah, what's the or else?
Well, we just get further doomed.
We just keep getting what we've got.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the wake up. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you.
Best wishes for the project, and love to everybody.